Get Even is one of the most bizarre games I've played in a long time. It's labelled as a first-person shooter, but that's really only in terms of the camera perspective, as it's a game that favours its storytelling much more than it does its gameplay, often leaving those sections of the game feeling extremely unrefined and often downright terrible. It's developed by The Farm 51, who are known for developing Painkiller Damnation and the Necrovision series, a bunch of games that are all about shooting things over and over. And the direction they've taken with Get Even is practically the polar opposite of what they've pulled off in the past. In terms of its story, it's really hard to go into too much detail without somehow inadvertently spoiling something. I mean, even the gameplay footage can kind of give elements away about the environment or characters that's best experienced in-game. However, for all those people whose fingers are already hovering over the S button, ready to complain about how much I'm spoiling things, it's also worth noting that this is a game that genuinely never stops giving away important plot elements. So if you think you've seen something in this video that's a spoiler, well, I can guarantee you that it's probably not, as Get Even is always constantly throwing some kind of new plot device into the mix, and nothing is ever what it seems.
I understand your curiosity, but there will be time for questions later, Mr. Black. Please, proceed.
At the absolute most basic level, the story is about a guy simply known as Black who is initially reliving some kind of memory where he was unable to save a kidnapped girl from a bomb. At this point, Black wakes up inside what appears to be an asylum with the memory-exploring Pandora device attached to his head and his actions monitored by a man named Red who serves as the closest thing to an antagonist. Exploring the asylum, Black uncovers other inmates also wearing the Pandora device, and he also comes across various clues and other pieces of information that begin to slowly uncover the secrets around his past, with the ambiguous assistance of Red along the way.
What the fuck is going on?
Through reliving different memories, some of which are his own, others of which are formed from fragments of other people, this blurry picture starts to take form, involving industrial espionage, corruption, betrayal, murder, and all that kind of shit. Along the way, you're making decisions which will have eventual consequences, though it can be often hard to tell when these moments are occurring, and they're hardly black or white decisions either, making it hard to ascertain just what the hell it is you've done.
Praise you, my Caesar! This world is yours. It always was.
However, I really think that this distorted and jarred way of telling the story is what makes the game so captivating. Moving through these memory blocks and uncovering these clues piece by piece in between the banter between Red and Black is really intriguing stuff, helped by some incredible voice acting and a really impressive soundtrack.
The police wrote the whole thing off as a drug deal gone wrong.
But that's not what you believe.
I believe everything in life is connected, Mr. Black. The only question is how. Let's find out, shall we?
And I just never wanted to stop playing because I always wanted to get to that next cinematic or exchange of dialogue for the next piece of the puzzle to fall into place. And then just when you thought you'd made sense of everything, the board gets flipped and the pieces all get jumbled again. The way the game constantly shifts between different streams of consciousness leaves you hanging on the edge of your seat, and Black's frustration over the confusion to his own whereabouts and memories echoes that of the player at times, as you often find yourself faced with more questions than answers. But you can rest assured, Sonny Jim, that by the end of the game, you'll know exactly what's going on, which I think is a real testament to the quality of the writing. I mean, even the end credits has dialogue that's still giving away crucial information. It's a shame then that despite telling such a fantastic story, that the majority of the gameplay is so horrible. The most I could say is that it's average at the absolute best of times. Black's got a phone that puts the smart in smartphone, where it can switch between a UV light, a camera, a heat vision, and a minimap that shows the locations and vision cones of enemies. All of which you're going to need in some form to solve the game's basic puzzles, as well as uncovering clues along the way. When you're not walking around solving puzzles, picking up clues by reading pieces of paper or scanning them with your smartphone, you're in stealth mode, crouch walking at a snail's pace to try to avoid mercenaries. Similar to the plot device in Inception about the subconscious being able to protect itself by manifesting resistance, well, the same applies in Get Even, with certain memories having a high concentration of mercenaries as a means of the memory supposedly trying to protect the truth. And we're told in-game that shooting these mercenaries is a bad thing because it disrupts the memories and distorts the truth even more, which is kinda handy because the combat is fucking awful. Once you're detected, enemies can see your exact position at all times and you're killed in seconds from gunfire. In fact, you're killed so quickly it begs the question as to why they even bothered to include combat in the first place. Now this would be fine if the stealth wasn't so average, but it's that kind of thing we've seen 100 times before. You know, where you just crouch down to activate some kind of stealth mode and then you try to stay out of an enemy's line of sight as you sneak around them to reach the next checkpoint. On very rare occasions, you can modify the environment with your phone to add or remove certain items or objects to your advantage, which is ultimately wasted potential as it just happens too infrequently. An important plot device is a weapon known as the corner gun, which is just a gun that aims around corners, allowing the player to fire without exposing themselves, and yet it's a little bit redundant because, as I said, we're told early on in the game that getting into gunfights is a bad thing. So again, kind of including weapons just seems pointless. Close range takedowns are available as another option. You know that old gimmick where you walk up behind someone, press a button and get this preset animation? But there's no non-lethal means of doing this, so your only option if you're trying to get the best possible outcome is to simply avoid everyone entirely, which is easier said than done. Overall, the shooting and stealth are just janky and sloppily thrown together, and it's clearly an element of the game that's received the least amount of polish. I'd say about 2/3 through the game there's a bit of a shift in the way combat and stealth is approached, but it's still hands down the weakest area of the game, and it really didn't need to be. More refined shooting and stealth mechanics would have made those moments in between the exposition a lot more enjoyable, but as it is, it's just a chore before you can get on to the next part of the story. This is one of the main areas of the game I think that hints that this really hasn't been made by a huge AAA developer, along with certain aspects of the presentation. Now, the game runs on the Unreal 4 engine, and for the most part, it looks decent enough. Some of the outside areas and a few of the areas inside the asylum and abandoned buildings genuinely kind of look photorealistic at times. The character models during some of the flashback sequences look almost too realistic. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if they've actually scanned in real people instead of modeling them from scratch. On the flip side though, you'll see environments that honestly look last gen, and some of the models for enemies look pretty horrible as well. There's also some blurry texture work here and there with half-assed lighting that looks really dated. I don't know if I'd say the visuals are bad, but they're definitely inconsistent, and inconsistent's probably the best word to describe Get Even on the whole. Get Even is a hard sell. Its story is definitely its biggest strength, and if you're the type of person who doesn't mind spending upwards of 10 or 15 minutes having plot elements divulged in great detail, well, then you're really going to soak the whole thing up and have a pretty good time. The system they use when you finish the game for going back and collecting all the clues you missed, I think could be a bit more intuitive. And I also wish the game had a few more options for tackling stealth, but all things considered, I really do think the story carries the whole thing along enough that it's possible to see past some of the game's shortcomings. If you're the type of person, however, who likes their games to have a bit more meat on the bones and is expecting lots of intense, challenging stealth action gameplay, well, then you're going to be disappointed. This is absolute bare bones, run-of-the-mill stealth / combat that you're ever going to see in a shooting game. And it really is a shame that this aspect of the gameplay is so sloppy, because if it had a bit more polish, it would have really propelled the game to another level and made it, I think, one of the best first-person shooters of 2017. As it is, it's still an entertaining game, but it's a classic example of style over substance. But strangely enough, it's one of those rare occasions when that's not actually an entirely bad thing.